So Drop is back and in stock now with a new amp in their THX lineup. This is the AAA ONE. They did send this one out for review, but they didn't send this one. The THX AAA 789, which I purchased at its original price of $400 USD. Now it's priced at $300. It is my daily driver. The AAA ONE comes in at $200 and it drops the balanced ins and outs that we get on the 789, but supposedly still hangs on to the clean linear THX sound. We're going to compare it to my $100 entry level recommends, as well as the exact same priced Schitt Magnius. You ready? Let's go! So priced at $200 USD, the THX AAA ONE is dead simple in its approach. The front panel only has a power button, single-ended headphone output and quarter-inch, the 3-stage gain selector, and the volume pot. You also get a pre-selection button that allows you to use this amp as a preamp. This is handy for outputting to a different amp, like putting a tube amp in your chain, or outputting to powered desktop speakers or studio monitors. Big detail here is that the One will not output over the pre's and the headphone out at the same time, and the volume knob actually controls the volume to the pre's as well. So if you are using powered desktop speakers, you do have a unified volume knob there. On the rear, again, it's dead simple. You got RCA ins, outs, and your DC power connector. Form factor and case design is standard fare Drop. It's understandable why they did this, as it stacks up really nice with the rest of the products in the Drop lineup. Just be aware that if space is a factor, it does take up considerably more desktop footprint than the Atom or like a Magni Modi stack. Still, with the nice hefty aluminum case here, the buttons feel as cheap as they do on the 789, but the gain knob feels good, and the volume pot is smooth, though it lacks like any syrupy resistance that you get on higher end stuff. So while it's really visually obvious that this amp is missing the physical XLR inputs and outputs that normally come with a balanced amp, it's not the only difference. There's also a whole conversation around how balanced exactly the THX 789 really is, but that's a whole other video. The biggest thing with balanced is that if you do have headphones that can take advantage, you'll normally get a lot more power output out of the balanced than you will running it single-ended. Single-ended power off the 789 is 1800 milliwatts at 32 ohms and 200 milliwatts at 300 ohms. Balanced gets you 6,000 milliwatts at 32 ohms and 800 milliwatts at 300 ohms. Compare that to the AAA ONE, where you get 2700 milliwatts at 32 ohms and 280 milliwatts at 300 ohms. So the interesting note here is, while this thing can't hang with the balanced power output of the 789, it is beefier in its single-ended output. I will say too that in real life, everyday real-world usage, when I'm not testing headphones, I hardly ever use the balanced output on my 789. I normally run a DT1990 as my daily driver headphone, and I don't have a balanced cable for that. There is another physical feature on the 789 that I do miss on the One, and that's a toggle on the back that prevents the 789 from going completely into sleep mode. After a while, that 789 will default to shutting down completely, and you have to toggle the power button. You can't bypass that completely, so your amp is on all the time. Neither of these amps run hot enough to where I don't feel comfortable running them powered on 24/7. With the THX ONE, it just kind of goes into a reduced power sleep mode. And if you haven't used it for a while and you start a track, it may take just a second to come up to speed. After that, it's on. I just wish there was a way to disable that completely. In terms of audio performance, it's nearly indiscernible from the 789 to me. I would have an impossible time trying to pick them out from one another in a blind test. The strengths of THX, in my experience, are its ability to offer a really noise-free, totally dark background, as well as loads of clean, linear, transparent power. That is to say, it doesn't color the sound any particular way. That for me makes it ideal for auditing headphones, and that's why it's earned a place on my desktop since the day I bought it, and it's not moved since. The gain adjust makes it really easy to get a super black background on even really sensitive stuff like IEMs or low ohm headphones, and you can crank it up to power what I would say is probably 85% of the headphones you're going to come across without sacrificing that noise-free background. It's powerful enough to where I've never felt the need to go shopping for a more expensive or more powerful headphone amp. Having spent $400 on a headphone amp alone is enough for me. If I didn't review headphones, I wouldn't need a balanced out. It might be something that I was always a little curious about, but I don't know if it would be enough to make me spend that money. So when I say that spending $100 on an entry-level amp like a JDS Atom or a Magni, or spending $200 on a DAC amp combo or stack is really all you'd ever need, spending $200 on a dedicated linear headphone amp is definitely all you would ever need in the amp department unless you specifically wanted to go balanced. To flesh that out too, in case this is your first video, my audio perspective is normally aimed at the viewer who majors in gaming and minors in audio. So the first question then, does it perform significantly better than say that $100 Magni Heresy or $100 JDS Atom? We're talking twice as expensive. I used the SMSL SU8 as the DAC in all this testing, auditing with both the Focal Elex and the Noble Kaiser 10s. I can tell you that the THX is cleaner, but it's like 10% or so cleaner to me than the other options. And it helps if you know specifically what you're listening for to help make that determination. In a blind test, I would have a really tough time. It's more apparent versus like the 3 Plus, which has a naturally warmer, softer sound to me than the Heresy. The next obvious question then is, how does it compare to the $200 Schitt Magnius, the balanced added older brother to the Schitt Magni? I was curious myself, and my guy Josh Valor was nice enough to drop this off for comparison. Having balanced ins and outs, it's closer in feature set to the 789, but it's priced $100 below it. The balanced power here is 5,000 milliwatts at 32 ohm and 1,000 at 300 ohm. The single-ended output is 2,000 milliwatts at 32 and 300 milliwatts at 300 ohms. On paper, adding balanced support at the same price and having similar single-ended performance seems like a no-brainer. The Magnius is a looker too, and the build quality is there. The volume pot here feels really premium as well. Comparing the single-ended performance of these two units, it's the same thing as the other comparison for me. A less than 10% discernible difference in quality, with the THX leaning a little cleaner, but again, I would have a very tough time picking these out from one another. Both have solid detail, both have a really quiet background, both handle delicate IEMs and bigger headphones easily. The THX just delivers that clean, powerful, linear sound without adding any character to it at all or coming off harsh. The Magnius, like the Magni lineup, has a 2-stage high-low gain, where the one has a more granular 3-stage, but in practice, both approaches work equally well in terms of flexibility. It's worth pointing out too that the Magnius also offers balanced XLR outs on the rear, something you don't even see on the 789, where you can't output over the RCAs if you're inputting over XLR. The Magnius is a connectivity and flexibility powerhouse at this price point. I would totally buy this stack. So that lands the conclusion in a less than exciting place. And for me, that all comes down to price point. $200. There's just a lot of competition out there at that price point. It's a solid product. It performs well. I like the form factor, but a $200 price tag here on this unit at this point in time just doesn't give me a lot to get stoked about. At $150, it would have been no contest. It's definitely worth the $50 jump over the Magni or the JDS Atom. It would have made the conversation between it and the Magnius much more interesting. It would have came in at half the price of the 789 to make that conversation more interesting. At $150, it would have been a total mic drop, pun thoroughly intended. At $200, it's just another capable unit in a really crowded marketplace that gets a slight hair-splitting head nod for its cleanliness and its detail over its competitors. As always, links down in the description for everything we talked about today. Any questions, hit me in the comments. And that's it for this time. I'm Brian P. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to hit that like button, hit that sub button, and until next time, stay up.